Today, we're going to break down the ultimate strategy to building lean muscle without gaining body fat. Let's go. Now, there's one thing I hear more than anything else. It's, Eric, how do I build muscle without gaining body fat? And what happens with a lot of people is they start to build muscle, but then they feel like they're getting a little bit greasy, a little bit glazed over. They're losing that muscle definition. And then they go right back to cutting. And what happens is you get the cyclical approach where you're bulking, you're cutting, you're bulking, you're cutting, and your body never really changes. And it feels like you know exactly what to do, but nothing is working, and it's very dejecting. And so what we need to do is have a strategic way to bulk up, to build lean muscle at good size without gaining body fat. Now, this is a journey that I struggled on for a while. I remember I got done playing football, and I'm like, you know what? Might as well just get jacked. Don't have to run sprints. Don't have to be a defensive back and do all that stuff anymore. And so I remember just guzzling these protein shakes. Man, I used to have a weight gainer where I used mint chocolate chip ice cream with an actual weight gainer, like some Weider 5000 cheap ass, disgusting, chalky weight gainer. It was like 1,000 calories for 2 or 3 scoops. And I would be crushing these 2,000 calorie, shakes that I was making. I'll tell you what, it was fun for about 3 days. And then digestive hell came pretty soon. I ended up being lactose intolerant and having to go to the doctor afterward because I messed my gut up so bad. But this was the classic example of a young guy trying to add size, thinking, hey, let's just add as many calories as we can, and then we are going to build lean muscle. But the reality is you can only build muscle so fast. And because of that, if you just start to jack your calories up way too high, especially if you're natural, not on gear, not juicing, you are going to have one hell of a time building lean muscle without getting body fat. And so what do we actually need to think about? Well, first, we only need a calorie surplus of really 300 to 500 calories to really maximize muscle growth. We can try to add size faster, but we're going to add a lot more body fat, right? And so a very simple way of thinking about this, let's say body weight times 15 is your maintenance calories based on how much you're training. Again, it could be, let's say, for example, that's 3,000 calories. Well, maybe we just want to bump up to 3,300 or 3,500 in order to add that size. Say if your normal calories at maintenance are 2,500, maybe you only want to go up to 2,800 to build that size, right? It's about being able to eat the right amount of food to maximize the muscle building response, but not more. So we're adding that body fat. And we'll get into a few of those specifics as we roll forward. But I think it's really important for us to talk about setting expectations, right? Especially in the world of social media, we see people make these crazy transformations and we extrapolate the 1 in 10 million result that we see and expect us to be able to get the same results without understanding the rest of what's actually happening behind the scenes. And so we need to understand that the muscle building process is much slower than losing body fat, right? So even fast progress, and we can look at a lot of different research here. We can look at Alan Aragon. There's a Lyle McDonald genetic muscular potential. There's a Casey Butt equation that gets really nerdy into it. But what we find out is we can really expect, and this is for beginners, people who are just getting started, who haven't trained consistently, the increase of about 1 to 1.5% of their total body weight per month from lean muscle tissue. And so let's use the example of Jake. Let's say Jake's a 26-year-old guy who hasn't really lifted since high school, has been focused on his career after he got out of college, and he's 140 pounds, right? So if we want to look at numbers like this, we want to kind of shoot the middle. Jake could add about 1.7 pounds of lean muscle tissue per month. It doesn't sound like a whole lot, does it? 1.75 pounds, eating all this food, training hard? Well, think about this. If you added 20 pounds of muscle to your body in a year, that would be pretty dramatic, right? Well, that's what we can do. And so what happens is a lot of people think that progress is so slow in the beginning that they program hop, they do all these things that end up sabotaging the results, and they never really stick with it. And so in the case of Jake, if he eats enough calories, if he trains 3 to 5 days per week, taking exercises close to failure and sleep 6 to 8 hours per night, you could probably gain 21 pounds of lean muscle tissue. Could be 30 pounds overall, right? That would be a dramatic shift. So we have to think about it from that perspective. We tend to overestimate what we can do in the short term, but underestimate what we can do in the long term. I think most of us listening here, if we gained 20 pounds of muscle reflecting back over the last couple of years, we would be thrilled, right? So we have to keep that perspective. Now, if we want to look at how things slow down, if we want to talk about that 1.5 to 2 pounds of body weight, according to the Alan Aragon model and the Lyle McDonald model, which is like 20 to 25 pounds in a year, about 2 pounds per month, that typically goes and gets cut in half once we are an intermediate. So an intermediate is somebody who's been training hard, training correctly, eating the right way, eating at that surplus, getting enough sleep, all of that stuff consistently for 1 year. And so this is where most people find themselves, intermediates. A lot of people have trained for years, but they're really not getting past the beginner or intermediate stage because they're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and hoping that something sticks and just following workouts off of social media. That's not going to get you past the beginner stages. So somebody, though, who has been doing the right things, who's an intermediate, can expect to gain about 0.5 to 1% of their total body weight in a month, according to the Alan Aragon model. If you want to look at the Lyle McDonald genetic muscular potential model, then we're talking 10 to 12 pounds. This basically comes out to 1 pound per month. And so now Jake is in year 2 of his training. Let's even take this on a higher end. He's adding 1.2 pounds of muscle per month. That's 14 pounds in a year. So over the course of 2 years, skinny little Jake has added about 30 pounds of lean muscle tissue. Damn, he's crushing it. He's crushing it, right? And then we talk about year 3 of training. Let's say the proper training now, he's getting more advanced. He's, strong. He's lifting double his body weight in a deadlift or a squat, something like that. Great. That progress gets cut in half again as you get more advanced to maybe 0.25 to half a percentage of your total body weight per month, according to Alan Aragon. And then we're talking maybe 5 to 6 pounds over the course of a year, or half a pound with the Lyle McDonald model. And so if we're looking at Jake, our example here, he's now 175 pounds, adding about 0.65 pounds of muscle per month. That could be 7 pounds of muscle in a year. So Jake, now over the course of 3 years and change, has gone from that skinny 140-pound guy all the way up to 183 pounds-ish, and he is topped off from there. And so what we have to think about, just from an understanding component, is we have to do things right to take ourselves out of the beginner stage. Just training doesn't mean that we are not beginners anymore, which leads a lot of people to chase fancy methods in their workouts that aren't really going to help support them. As we train, our muscle potential decreases with each year as we get more advanced. So we have to understand that the rate of progress we are getting is going to slow down. If people compare the rate of progress that they make as a beginner and hope to make that for the rest of their lives, they end up chasing fancy strategies and tools because they think they're not making progress at what's actually a great rate, because their expectations are out of alignment, which is why this is so important. So we have to understand that they're going to slow down and basically get cut in half each ensuing year. And furthermore, we find out that basically with all these models, if we're talking about the Alan Aragon model, the Lyle McDonald model, and the Casey-Butt equation, that people can typically, I'm speaking about men specifically, we can take all these numbers and actually have them when it comes to women, but we're talking about 40 to 50 pounds of lean muscle total can be added naturally on your frame once you begin, right? So once you kind of get past that natural level of 40 to 50 pounds added, you're probably at the top of your genetic potential. So muscle growth will slow down over time. For women, it's going to be about half those amounts. As a quick recap, say year 1, you add 2 pounds per month. Year 2, 1 pound per month. Year 3, half a pound. Then after that, it can be a lot smaller. I know for me, if I continue to train hard, and really what happens is like, it's almost like the density of your muscles change. Like your aesthetics can change even if the scale stays pretty much the same. I might gain a couple pounds of muscle in a year and be happy, right? Because that's going to help offset the age-related muscle loss that can also happen over time. So hopefully that gives you a good kind of ballpark, right? And so what we need to do is think about how much muscle do you want to add, reverse engineer it based on where you're at specifically, and then set an appropriate timeline. Because the muscle building process is so much slower than losing body fat, we have to have a much longer time frame. Personally, like the way that I train now at 35 is I always stay lean, I always stay healthy. I very rarely get above 12 to even 15% body fat. And this is where most guys need to sit all the time, where you almost have visible abs. Like that's what you need to do to be healthy. Is I'll stay in that and I will focus on building lean muscle 10 to 11 months out of the year, kind of building muscle or maintain, right? Because that process takes so much longer and I want to consistently add some lean muscle, especially as I get older, right? Because of that, because I stay very healthy metabolically and I don't let my body fat get too high, if I get 4 to 6 weeks out from a vacation, from a trip, from a photo shoot, I can follow a very aggressive diet, not really lose any muscle because that duration's short enough, but lose a ton of body fat. Meaning I really only have to go on a fat loss cut maybe once per year for 4 to 6 weeks. That's a very sustainable, practical way for a lot of people to operate, but it's the complete opposite of what most people do, where they kind of half-ass yo-yo diet for 11 months, then they bulk up, and then they wonder, why they're not getting results. So if we get lean and then we focus on the proper schedule and expectations, that's going to be the best way to build muscle while getting lean. Now, a few things we need to focus on. Let's talk about diet specifically if you want to be lean and healthy. The classic idea of the dirty bulk is honestly one of the dumbest. It's something that so many people use as an excuse, as a reason to get lazy, and then it's eat whatever they want. It's not going to work for you. You might be able to get away with it when you're 18, 19, but for most people, you're just going to gain a bunch of body fat. And the more body fat we gain, the more inflammation we have, the less effectively the less our insulin sensitivity works. And by extension, we just continue to add more fat, lose muscle, all that shitty stuff. So, what do we need to avoid? We need to avoid consuming too many calories. If we overconsume calories, we're actually going to experience what's called fat hyperplasia, which is the splitting and creation of more fat cells. We do not want that, because the only thing we can actually do to reduce fat cells is literally get them cut out. So once you get fatter, it gets easier to stay fatter and harder to stay leaner. That's what we want to avoid, that dirty bulk. Number three, on top of that, if we consume too many calories and we experience fat hyperplasia, we're going to have decreased insulin sensitivity. Just mentioned that, not great. We can also develop shitty habits. And so if you're just eating whatever you can get your hands on because you're trying to build muscle, you can pretty soon start to have some pretty nasty eating habits dial in, which can be harder to break and make it harder for you to get leaner. And then, of course, if we rush the process, again, we're just going to gain too much body fat. And so from a dietary perspective, we should focus on taking our calories. So I like to start like this, right? Body weight in pounds times 15. So if you're 200 pounds, 3,000 calories, that should put you in a good spot if you're active and have not been like crash dieting, right? From that, you can probably increase calories to 300 to 500. So you might be eating 3,300 calories. Not a massive surplus. If you want to think about that too as well, right? Like the amount of calories we would need to hit that amount really equates to a protein shake and a banana above what you're already eating. So you don't need to start going to McDonald's and crushing a double bacon cheeseburger. You can just have a protein shake and a banana instead, and that's going to help keep that fat gain quite a bit lower. So when it comes for that slight calorie surplus, let's say we have that locked in, we want to make sure that we're still eating good, clean calories, right? Because inherently, if we're at a surplus, even if we're keeping things clean, our body's going to take a small amount of that and likely store body fat. You're going to have an increase in body weight because you're going to have more carbohydrates. And because of that, your body stores more water. So we want to make sure that we are eating clean quality food. So for carbohydrates, I'm talking eating things like fruit. I'm thinking starchy vegetables. I'm thinking tubers, root veggies, all of that stuff. I eat a lot of sweet potatoes, white potatoes, Yukon Gold potatoes, white rice, specifically on my workout days, oatmeal. Cream of rice is a great post-workout thing to have, in addition to a lot of fruit. Also, most vegetables have carbohydrates in there as well. Yes, those count as well. So that's the carbohydrates we're talking about. We're not just having Skittles. We're not, picking Cheetos out of our belly button. Shout out Bejos Koulian. And eating a lot of junk food. It's keeping things cleaner as we go throughout the day. Protein. We want to be about 1 gram per pound of body weight. What we can actually do when it comes to building lean muscle is when we have excess calories, specifically when we have more carbohydrates are protein sparing, meaning when we have carbohydrates flowing through our body, it's going to prevent the breakdown of lean muscle tissue. One of the reasons we actually want more protein during fat loss periods is because we don't have enough calories, so our body's going to be breaking down fuel. Hence, we want more protein to offset any muscle protein breakdown. When it comes to actually being a calorie surplus, you can have still high protein, but we don't need to push it as high as we would relatively compared to fat loss. And so you can be about 0.82 grams per pound of body weight up to 1 gram per pound of body weight. Using that 200-pound person example, this would put your protein at about 165 to 200 grams per day. It doesn't need to be higher because you're getting more calories and supporting the prevention of muscle breakdown from the additional carbohydrates that you're getting. When it comes to protein, I like to get 4 meals of 40 to 50 grams of protein per meal. And so that's typically going to be lean beef, bison, venison, chicken, turkey, eggs, egg whites, seafood. Baked or grilled is going to be your best bet. Those are going to be very simple. When it comes to your meat as well, a lot of people eat 80-20, because it's cheaper, which I get based on the way that food prices have been for years now, which is wild. But if you really want to be able to keep your fat grams dialed in, look for things that are going to be 93+% lean. That's going to be great. I do a lot of flank steak as well. And even like when I'm doing something like eggs, right? I'll probably have maybe 2 eggs, but then I'll do a cup of egg whites. Again, that's going to help keep my fat lower, which is going to build a buffer for more carbohydrates, which is going to support more muscle growth, right? So protein, basically foods that had a face, close to 1 gram per pound of body weight. That'll cover your fats as well, basically. I mean, you can have some nuts and avocados and oils as well, but that's going to really help you dial in. Now, specifically when it comes to building lean muscle, we want to think about this, right? Adding more fat isn't really going to support more lean muscle growth. Like the benefit of fat in your diet is to support hormone function and cellular health, right? And so we don't need to jack fats up higher. What we want to be able to do, because we are probably sufficiently lean at this point, is having more carbohydrates. And so there might be days when I am 2 grams of carbohydrates per pound of body weight. So say if I'm 200 pounds, that could be 400 grams of carbs. It probably sounds like a lot, especially if you've been doing a lot of these higher fat diets, which have been so in vogue for a while now. So it might be something you want to gradually build up. But if you want to think about it, you want to set your calories, you want to get your protein, and then you can split carbohydrates and protein up in a way that feels natural for you to be able to hit those calories that you need and your protein. Over time, yeah, you will want to take that fat a little bit lower, keep the carbohydrates a little bit higher, but that's generally how I like to start things out with my clients because it provides a lot more of a practical way for being able to get in shape and not feel like you have to completely change your diet, which is, again, very difficult for a lot of people, and it leads to a lack of sustainability. A lot of times with a muscle building diet, you have to gradually increase those calories and carbohydrates because if you've been going lower carbohydrate and lower calorie, if we jack those calories up too quickly, again, that's where body fat comes in. And that's why all this stuff is relative and why I personalize it and customize it for all of my clients, right? Now, carbohydrates. One thing that I do like to focus on is typically timing our carbohydrates. After a training session, our body is going to be most receptive to taking carbohydrates and using them to refuel, to restore muscle glycogen, and to decrease cortisol, our body's primary stress hormone. And so typically on days when you're having more carbohydrates or on your training days is when we want to have more carbohydrates. Typically what I like to do is we will take our clients directly through our carb cycling approach, cyclical shredding. And what this does is this helps you use the increased energy expenditure, the increased muscular contractions and insulin sensitivity from your training to have more carbohydrates. When we have more carbohydrates after a training session, that means we can build more lean muscle. So that's going to be huge. And then we can pull carbohydrates back a little bit on the other days. And so that's going to be relative to you. But again, we want to time our carbohydrates so we're having more of them directly around our workout and on the days when we are training because our body's going to be more receptive to them. Now, when it comes to your training, the beautiful thing here is when you have more sleep, more recovery, more food, that means your body can handle more load, more volume in the gym. And so typically what I like to do is I'll do a program that's 4 to 5 days per week, 45 to 60 minutes. Sometimes you can take those a little bit longer if you are nailing the training and the diet part. When it comes to building lean muscle, though, we like to hit a number of different rep schemes. You see, one thing I've realized is a lot of people, frankly, are too weak. They only train, say, 8, 10, 12, 15 rep sets and are chasing the pump. That's not what we want. When it comes to building lean muscle, we need to be able to lift heavy and we need to be able to train to get stronger. And so the reason this is we create what's called mechanical tension inside of your muscles, which drives a muscle building response. But beyond that, beyond triggering one of the most important things for actually building muscle, when you train a bit heavier, you're going to activate more muscle fibers, right? So if you do an exercise and you can activate, say, 80% of your muscle fibers instead of 60, that means you can train a greater proportion of your muscle and create a bigger overall training response, right? And so we can do this because when we train heavy, our central nervous system has to be able to communicate with our body and recruit more muscle fibers to generate more strength to lift a heavier weight. And so if you think about it, training heavier is going to help directly create a muscle building response with mechanical tension, but it's also going to increase the number of muscle fibers we can recruit. And by extension of recruiting and training more muscle fibers, we can then fatigue them with your higher rep training later on. And so I might start with an exercise, say, for example, I'll do a squat and I'll do 3 sets of 4 to 6 because I'm training hard, I'm building that strength. As that strength goes up, because I'm stronger, I can now lift a lighter weight for more reps and create a bigger muscle building response later on. So it directly builds muscle and makes the rest of your workouts more effectively. And so let's say we do that, that was my first exercise in the squat. Great. Now my next exercise might be a Romanian deadlift. Now we're going to increase the reps a little bit, 3 times 6 to 8 reps, right? And we have a combination of tension and a bit of a pump. Now maybe we go 3 sets of 10 to 12 reps on something like a lunge. Great. And then finally what we want to burn out on, let's say we're doing leg curls and leg extensions. Awesome. 3 sets of 12 to 15. This way, we are training the low rep style to be able to build strength, to be able to improve performance, to be able to improve muscle fiber recruitment, which is going to make all the rest of the training with the higher rep stuff more effective because we can lift a heavier weight for more reps and create more overall fatigue. And so when we do that combination, we are really hitting all the key components that we need with our workouts for building lean muscle because we have mechanical tension, we have metabolic stress, aka the pump, and then finally muscular damage. That is some of the soreness that can come with it. If we do that, we're creating all the physiological processes that we need in order to build that lean muscle. Now, you might have questions. Cardio, what the heck does that look like? Hey, The old myth of doing cardio where you should just eat a shitload of calories and train hard and then sit on the couch, that's not going to be healthy for you, especially as you get older, right? Like we need to be able to make sure that our body is healthy at the same time. Typically, the only thing that ends a bulking cycle is if somebody gets too unhealthy. And so, what I like to do as a first baseline is make sure we're getting at least 8,000 steps per day. I think this is just a good basic overall activity level for health. Now, as you're getting a little bit older, though, specifically guys after 30, 35, we want to start thinking about heart health. We want to start thinking about metabolic efficiency. And so, in that case, I would say 10 to 15 minutes once per week, if not twice per week, using some form of high intensity interval training. I will use the assault bike. I'll go 60 seconds all out, try not to throw up all over the garage, and then rest for about 60 seconds and repeat that for 10 to 15 minutes, right? Or I'll do some sprint work with the same work to rest ratio, 10 to 15 seconds, and then 60 seconds rest. Sorry, I think I misspoke on the assault bike. 10 to 15 seconds rest, and then about 60 seconds recovery for 10 to 15. You can also do zone 2 cardio. So, for example, that would be something like an incline walk where, yeah, you're working, but you can still hold a conversation. Going for a bike ride. The key here is to keep your heart rate about 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate for a longer duration. These things will help you stay leaner. They will help you, frankly, break down food and the additional calories that you're having more effectively. They'll keep your mitochondria healthy. So it's really important, from a health perspective, and also mitigating fat gain. Now, the big thing with cardio, though, is we do not want to turn your weight training workouts into cardio. We want to rest long enough to be able to take those exercises close to failure from a muscle building workout. And with cardio specifically, what we have to understand is weight training creates one physiological trigger, what we call mTOR. And when we do cardio, we are triggering what we call AMPK. So essentially, we have these two things that are battling it out. Whereas if we create a muscle building response and then we can do cardio right after, the AMPK, the signal that we create from doing cardio, typically will actually block the muscle building response. And so what we want to do with your cardio is we want to separate it directly from that weight training if we can. Right? We want to do it at least 6 hours if it's the same day or a different day entirely in order to avoid having that crossover effect, which can basically dull the signal from muscle building. Now, if you want to do 10 to 15 minutes of cardio, say zone 2 cardio before you go in the gym, that can be fine. That can be a great way for you to warm up. I don't think the intensity of that is going to negatively impact the training response that you get from lifting weights. But what we don't want to do is do a sprint workout, get completely gassed, and then go try to train legs, right? Because you're going to have that cumulative fatigue that's set in from it. And by extension, it's going to limit the impact of what your training can actually be. Hey, and then finally, guys, the most important thing here is going to be sleep. If you're not getting enough sleep, you're going to negatively impact your insulin sensitivity. So if you want to think of it this way, if you're only getting 5 or 6 hours of sleep and then you're eating a calorie surplus to build muscle, your body's much more likely to add a greater percentage of body fat than it is lean muscle tissue because your testosterone is going to be suppressed. Your insulin sensitivity, how well your body can break down and use those nutrients, is going to be suppressed, right? So the key to being able to do everything better, to be able to get more bang for your buck, to support testosterone levels, to keep fat gain at bay, is going to be getting that 7 hours of sleep. We talk about this a lot, but it's something you just have to do. You have to commit to it, right? Find different things you can cut back on, because if you're not getting adequate sleep, all of your hormonal systems, everything when it comes to your health is going to be negatively impacted. And so the key to being able to lose body fat and be able to build lean muscle, to be able to do a lean bulk specifically, comes from having a slight calorie surplus, not a steep deficit that's impractical for you to stick to. It comes down to training hard, taking exercises close to failure without neglecting strength. It comes to spacing your training and your your training in the gym with your weight training and your cardiovascular exercise more effectively. And it comes down to being very consistent with these things over the long course of time with the right expectations and getting enough sleep. Now, if you want to be able to build muscle and look great naked without living in the gym, I just updated our new chiseled muscle cheat sheet. All you have to do is go over on Instagram, send me a private message at Bach Performance with the keyword muscle, and I will send you over that new guide 100% free. Gang, as always, thank you so much for joining here. If you're getting value directly from this, please do me a favor. Share it with a friend, share it on your Instagram story, tag me at Bach Performance. That is what helps us get the right information in the right hands, helps us pay for the show, do all of that stuff, and keep bringing this right information for you so you can look right naked without living in the gym. I'm Eric Bach signing off. Thank you. And as always, train hard, train smart, and I will catch you on the next one.